So the first stop on our tour today is the Lincoln Cabin. Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky, but his father moved the young family into southern Indiana. When Abraham Lincoln was just 9 years old, he lost his mother to a frontier illness called the milk sickness, where she drank some milk that had been tainted. Mr. Lincoln's father quickly remarried, married a woman who had 3 children, and so Abraham and his sister were then part of a blended family. Behind me, you'll see a replica cabin, not unlike the one that Abraham Lincoln grew up in southern Indiana. The original Lincoln cabin no longer exists now, but this cabin would have housed maybe 7 or 8, and sometimes 9 people in this little cabin, cramped quarters. And Abraham Lincoln, as a young man, as a young boy really in his teenage years in southern Indiana, was hungry for education. He read every book that he could get his hands on, any newspaper, and he even got his hands on about 11 sheets of paper, of which he worked out some arithmetic problems. He even wrote a little poetry in there. And in our collection, sometimes it goes on display here in the museum, we have one of those sheets of paper. Abraham Lincoln took 2 different flatboat trips, one from southern Indiana, one from Illinois, and he went down the Mississippi River all the way to New Orleans. And when he got to New Orleans, we think he saw a scene like this one. And American slavery was the biggest issue that the people of Mr. Lincoln's generation faced. Mr. Lincoln, as he tells us in his letters, he always hated slavery. He wasn't an abolitionist, but he was certainly against slavery because it did not allow an American the right to rise in society. Mr. Lincoln came from a humble walk of life, and through education, through hard work, he could rise, and eventually he became President of the United States. Slavery was an artificial barrier, and that's why he did not like slavery. And of course, the worst part of American slavery, if you can believe it, was not just the hard work, not just the physical beatings sometimes that took place, but it's this scene right here, and that is the breakup of the family. A father sold in one direction, mother in another, and a child sold in a different direction. So welcome to New Salem. When Abraham Lincoln struck out on his own to make his own life in Illinois, he settled in a small village along the Sangamon River called New Salem. He learned some of the basics of English grammar. He was part of a debating society, and he began to study the law. He also tried out a number of different occupations, including surveying, including being the postmaster, and he even, for a time, served in the militia during the Black Hawk War. But Abraham Lincoln in New Salem, it's really his college experience. He's not only becomes educated, he falls in love for the first time with a young lady named Anne Rutledge, who he's speaking to at the counter. And Mr. Lincoln realizes what his dream is, to become a lawyer and to become a member of the Illinois State Legislature. This room is a room from Abraham Lincoln's law office. Abraham Lincoln was an extremely hard-working lawyer. He was a lawyer for 25 years, was involved in more than 5,000 legal cases, more than 400 of them before the Illinois Supreme Court. But in this scene today, it's probably a Sunday. Mary is probably at church, and Mr. Lincoln has brought his 2 young children to his law office. And as you can see, they were not known to be very well behaved. Abraham and Mary Lincoln were notoriously lax parents. They both had in common the unfortunate circumstance of not having very happy childhoods themselves. Abraham Lincoln lost his mother. He never really found his place in the new blended family, dreamed about the day when he could make his own way in the world. And Mary, she had kind of a similar story. She lost her mother at a young age and never really found her place in a new blended family. But they were very on the same page in the sense that they wanted to give their children something they never had, which was a really happy childhood. And for them, that meant to give them really an unrestrained childhood. They were not disciplinarians, and it drove their contemporaries crazy. When they brought the kids around and their contemporaries saw that their children just ran around and were able to get away with almost anything, oh my goodness, they really were critical of the Lincolns as parents. But Abraham Lincoln told his wife, "Love is the chain whereby to bind our children to us." Stephen A. Douglas, who Mr. Lincoln is on the podium with here, is one of the most prominent Democrats in the country. Stephen Douglas introduces the idea of popular sovereignty, the idea that slavery may spread across the United States. Instead of being contained, it could actually grow. Abraham Lincoln and the Republicans are certainly opposed to this, and in 1858, Mr. Lincoln challenges Stephen A. Douglas for his seat in the United States Senate. As part of this campaign, Mr. Lincoln challenges Douglas to 7 debates that would take place across the state of Illinois in 7 different cities. Mr. Lincoln would maintain all men are created equal actually pertains to African Americans as well as the rest of the country. Stephen A. Douglas certainly has a different viewpoint. They battled it out in these 7 debates, and ultimately, at the end of this election, Stephen A. Douglas prevailed. He became the United States Senator, but 2 years later, these 2 political giants from Illinois would run against one another on the national stage, both for president.